Hello! Welcome to Plugging Along, a stream dedicated to Lotro plugins. Since this is my first stream on the official Lotro stream channel, I thought we'd take some time to cover the basics of Lotro plugins, what they are, where they are, and if we have time, the basics of creating your own plugin. I have a rough outline of topics I want to talk about today, but please do feel free to jump into chat with your thoughts and questions. We'll take them as we can. All right. Well, I've just zoned in here outside of Bree in the game. I'm just going to move off the path so people don't run me over. Awesome. And let me make sure I can see chat. Hello. Great. Okay. I got my little agenda over here on the other screen here. So, I don't see any immediate questions to talk about in chat, so let's jump straight in. What is a plugin? A plugin is a chunk of code that someone who is not SSG, not Standing Stone Games, puts together. It is not an official product, but it is interacting with the game in an officially supported way. It's player-made functionality, and it runs in what's called a sandbox. So Lotro exposes certain things that you can do in the game to the plugin, and the plugin does stuff with those carefully controlled interfaces. So what isn't a plugin? Well, there are lots of things that aren't plugins, but specifically, there are the concept of skins. You can change your user skin. There's all sorts of options to download, and those will change how the interface looks for you, but to my knowledge, they don't change the functionality or add new functionality. There are also external programs. One I've been playing around with quite a lot is called the Lotro Companion, and it's a Java-based desktop application. I've told it to start, and I'll drag it on over as soon as it does. Excellent. Okay, so this is Lotro Companion. It's a desktop application. It is outside of Lord of the Rings Online. In fact, I can minimize that, and we can see that it's doing its own thing here. And it can interact with Lord of the Rings Online to pull information about your characters, but it doesn't provide any in-game functionality. It's a way to look at your characters. So I might look at potentially what deeds a character has completed. Oh, apparently, I'm asking a lot of my computer right now. So we can come in here, look at the deed stats for this character, and see what deeds may or may not have been completed. And Companion thinks I've completed 1,400 deeds on this character. Awesome. But that's all happening outside of the game. Plugins are inside of the game. Yes, I do. I keep putting windows on top of my things I want to talk about window. It makes it a little hard to read it. Excellent. There we go. So, plugins are bits of code running inside the game. So, where do we find plugins? Well, one of the biggest ones that I know about is a website called lotrointerface.com. So, looks like this. The front page lists recent forum threads, although that's not as active as the actual Lotro forums, a new and updated section on the right, and a downloads button. And clicking on that downloads button gives us various categories. Now, Lotro Interface does host things for DDO as well, but we're specifically interested in Lotro plugins here. Elda is afraid to see how many deeds she's completed. Well, I'm not sure if you're afraid because you haven't done very many or because you've done all of them, but either way, it's pretty cool to see them all laid out. So, a thing that we're looking for right now for plugins is usually the Lotro standalone plugins category. And there's a bunch of subcategories under here. If you're looking for things that change how combat works, if you're looking for things that change how your action bars work, or give you more crafting user interfaces. Each one of these categories has a fair number of actual plugins inside of it. Now, this website has the actual plugin files themselves, but if you're just looking to be aware of plugins and when they are released, there's also the Lotro forums themselves. So if we come on in here, I'm just going to use a quick little link here. There is a plugins and requests section of the Lotro forums. Forum, community and social, user interface and Lua scripting, plugins and requests. Now, some of these other parts may also have posts, but this is where I tend to go and have subscribed to keep abreast of new developments in the plugin world. So we can see the most recent post on there was for the DTracker plugin, but also the Travel Window 2 has been updated recently, and so on. So that's a place to look if you're just looking at the Lotro forums. LotroInterface.com itself, you can find plugin files there as well. Aldela, if you have completed all the deeds, I am very impressed. That is excellent. It's life goals, really, and our Lotro goals. Okay, so how do we install a plugin? Well, there's a couple different ways. There's a manual process. When you first install Lord of the Rings Online, your install folder will look something like this. It may not even have a plugin data or a plugins folder. But these I've gone ahead and created them. They're well, they would be pretty empty, except my character just logged in, didn't it? That's funny. Excellent. So my plugins folder is empty, and in-game, if I go to my plugin manager, or you can type /plugins space manager, you can see my list of plugins is empty. Well, that won't do. This is a stream about plugins. We should get some of those. Well, the first thing we can do is just go to Lotro Interface and start downloading the plugin. Most plugin descriptions will have some concept of what does it take to install. If they don't, the process is very similar no matter what. In this case, we'll just follow the steps step by step. It says first thing, we need the turbine classes and examples. Okay, we'll go ahead and get those. This is also on Lotro Interface. And when we hit the download button, nope, I only meant to hit it once. We'll go ahead and get that started to load. So, Turbine Files has downloaded. I'm just going to extract it. I'm afraid I'm off screen at the moment because my downloads folder is a bit of a mess. So, when it's extracted, we see a folder called Turbine. Perfect. What do we do with it? Well, this has helpfully said, we want to see plugins Turbine. Okay. Plugins, Turbine, done. Next, unzip the archive from here. All right, download. Same thing, I'm gonna go grab that from my downloads directory, extract the zip file, and once that is done, we'll see a folder called Cube Plugins. We're going to move that into the plugins folder. Great. So what happens when we do that? Well, in-game, we can use the little arrow here to refresh the list of available plugins, and we can see DTracker 125 has been found. Excellent. That is exactly the version we were expecting to see, version 1.2.5. Now that was a lot of work. Is there an easier way to do that? There sure is. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete those. We can see that the game no longer sees them here. And we can use the plugin compendium. I highly recommend the plugin compendium. It's great. Its job is to automate all of that we just did. So when you first launch the Lotro plugin compendium, it looks like this. It'll show you what plugins you have installed. We don't have any. We should fix that. And it'll allow you to browse from the list of here and add them in. Now, there are a couple plugins I love to have. I love to have the Waypoint plugin. It really is a nice quality of life improvement. So we'll go ahead and add that. And what happens? We can see that Lotro plugin compendium has downloaded the necessary files and has put them in place. If we go back and do the deed tracker that we'd already done, we can see it's extracting all the files necessary. And we can see it's gone ahead and brought not only the turbine files, but also the turbine plugin samples. Neat. If we do a refresh here, we can see a couple of things. The Waypoint plugin that we brought in, the deed tracker, and some sample plugins, which are really interesting to look at when you want to develop plugins yourself. Let's see. So you can do it manually. You can always manually go out, and Lotro Interface is a great site. There may be others, but I've mostly stuck here. You can use the Lotro plugin compendium. Now, not every plugin on the Lotro Interface site has requested to be added into the compendium, and there are a few plugins where this is because the way the files are laid out in the zip file, the archive file, they're not quite right for the compendium, or they just haven't asked to be included. So this doesn't include every plugin that's on the site, but it does include a lot of the big name ones. So if you use the MiniRaid for character stats, if you use buff bars or buff monitor or the travel window, you'll usually find those in here. But worst case, you can always go straight to the Lotro Interface site and just download it manually like we saw. As long as you're comfortable extracting some zip files and moving files around on your computer, it's not a problem at all. And like I said, most plugins show the steps in their description if it's anything different than just move this file into the plugins directory. Okay, I'm just going to glance at chat and see if anyone's brought stuff up. Excellent. Well, people are here, but no active questions, so we will plug along, as it were. Okay, so how do we use plugins? Well, every plugin behaves a little bit differently, but in general, the plugin manager will show you what plugins Lotro knows about. This is only done on startup, so if you have been moving plugins in and out as we've been doing, you can always press this little green arrow. This doesn't update plugins. This doesn't change any plugins that are loaded. This is just the Lotro, please go look at that directory again and see if there's anything else in there. So we can see nothing has changed since the last time I clicked it. What else do we have? We can load plugins. Now by default, plugins, even if they're on your computer, do not get loaded in when you log on. By default, every plugin is off. But you can tell Lotro, yes, I would like you to please load this plugin every time I log in this character. I use it every time. I really want it. I don't want to have to go manually load it. But if you do manually load it, you click on the plugin, you click load, and it's loaded. Most plugins will send an output to the standard chat channel. In this case, you can see Waypoint and its version and who made it. Thank you, Lunar Water. This thing's amazing. If you're done with your plugins, you can always hit the unload all button and the plugin will go away. And you can see there's a visual difference to the loaded plugins and the unloaded plugins. The loaded ones have this light color, unloaded ones dark color. So you can manually load the plugins every time, but if you want the plugin to automatically load, you can go into the automatically load for drop down and select. I only want it for this character. I want it for these two characters. Oh, I want it for these three characters, but not any future characters I make, or all characters, even if they don't even exist now. And you can change that at any time. So we'll just set it to automatically load for Tide here. Excellent. You can have multiple plugins loaded at once. It's very helpful. Sometimes plugins can cooperate in some way, but usually they just are each there to add some piece of functionality. All right, we'll go ahead and move that button out of the way. So now we can see 2 plugins are loaded, 4 plugins are not. Okay, now because of some internal issues, it is difficult for Lotro to safely unload a single plugin. And so instead of potentially causing problems for players, they don't offer an unload one button at all. Now there are some ways to work around this if you want to include that as part of your plugin. But in general, Lotro can't guarantee that's a safe thing to do, so it doesn't try. Instead, there's an unload all button. If you want to unload a plugin, you can't do that specifically, but you can unload all of your plugins, and they are now unloaded. And let's say I wanted to unload the deed tracker, but I wanted Waypoint still loaded. Well, I can just come here and reload it. No big deal. I often run with maybe more like a dozen plugins loaded, and so that's a little inconvenient, and we can talk about ways to work around that for plugin development. But when you're just playing around with other people's plugins, if they don't provide an option to refresh themselves, to unload or to reload themselves, then sometimes the easiest way is just to log out and then set it to not load and log back in. Because when you do that, when you log in, all of those plugins, whether it's 1 or 20, will be automatically loaded back in. Now, Titan Bar, another very popular plugin, is one of those ones that's big enough where it really makes sense for it to come with its own way to refresh itself. There's a lot of moving parts going on, and this is useful not just for a developing standpoint, but maybe even for a player standpoint. So the Titan bar, which defaults to the slightly gray bar at the top of the screen, comes with options here to unload or reload. If I click that unload, you can see the Titan bar plugin has unloaded itself. As a side effect, the unloader is now loaded, so it's, yeah, there's trade-offs. But when you reload the Titan bar, the unloader is unloaded like that. So I see a question in chat. Mr. Tattoo Guy, will the plugin compendium automatically update plugins you have installed? And Eldolith, thank you for mentioning that. We can go ahead and fake this out. So if we come to Cube plugins, we're getting into a little bit of advanced stuff here. So close your eyes if you're not ready for this. But we can change what version we claim is installed on the machine by changing this version tag. And if we do that, we can go ahead and have Lotro plugin compendium rescan, and it's going to see, hey, I think the current version installed is 1.2.4, and that is not the same as the version that is on Lotro interface, 1.2.5. Very obviously colors it as yellow, making it stand out very nicely against all of the other plugins. And as LLS said, we can just click that and hit the update button, and boom, it has downloaded the current files, put them into place, and we're ready to go. Now, in some ways that's good, because updates to plugins can sometimes introduce bugs. I've done this myself, where I have released a version of the deed tracker that fixes these 4 things and breaks this one thing. And if you didn't need those 4 things fixed, but you did need this one thing that I just accidentally broke, then you would be better off not upgrading. And so for many plugin developers, those the early hours and days after you release a plugin are a chance for the wider community to discover things that you may not have realized were wrong with the plugin. And so being an early adopter, something new just came out, I must upgrade. No real harm. You're not going to damage Lotro. You're not going to injure your computer, but you might find some functionality that you're used to having doesn't work quite the same way anymore with that plugin. So I try very hard not to break stuff when I release a plugin, but things do happen. I can only test so much by myself and on the beta community on the Discord server. Cool, thank you for answering that, Aldoleth. And thank you for asking that. Okay, so we talked about the in-game plugin manager. Just to refresh, in-game, and you can't see me typing this, but I'm doing /plugins space manager. That goes directly to this window. But if you ever forget that, or more importantly, are running on a French or German client as a plugin developer, and it is a totally different command, you can always come to the caret window, which is down here just below my face, up to System, and it's the third one, Plugin Manager, and it opens that same window. Okay. Excuse me. Oh, a little bit more chat. Areas with is saying, sorry, new to this. Will this one be available later on the channel? And otherwise is mentioning, yes, and I do, as Little Redhead has chimed in, this will go up on YouTube somewhere, just so that if Twitch changes things and you can only have a finite of things saved on a channel, it won't disappear either way. So you'll be able to find it here for the foreseeable future, probably also on YouTube sometime after I remember to upload it. Cool, thank you. Good question. Okay, so that's how to launch the plugin manager. We can see the green arrow here. It says refresh. That's not clear, or wasn't clear to me when I was starting out. It's not updating plugins. It's not refreshing plugins that are already loaded. It's just refreshing the list here in case you have added or removed any plugins. We've talked about how to make sure a plugin automatically loads for one or more characters when you log in using this drop down here. Either existing characters or all characters, even ones that don't exist yet. We talked about unloading plugins. If you ever think that a plugin is causing you problems, or if you think your system is running a little bit slower, I usually will unload plugins when I'm doing screenshots or in-game video where I want nothing to show up. So I clear my UI here. Because of some of the peculiarities of the scripting system, it can be difficult for some plugins to know that you have done that and to know which state you're in. So sometimes a plugin will be window will be showing up here even though nothing else is. And just to be safe, because I'll want those screenshots of the really great in-game scenery to be free of plugins, I'll just go ahead and hit that unload all button. I don't have to worry about it. Now none of the plugins can accidentally pop up on this screen. So that's my most common use of unload all. But if you ever worry that a plugin is just thinking too much or taking too much processor time, CPU time, you can just hit that. It's totally fine because if you decide to change your mind, you can just come back in and say, you know what, let's go ahead and load that back up. Okay. Oh, you're very welcome. I hope you'll have a good time rewatching this. Okay, so how do we know more about a plugin? Well, there's a couple different ways. Most plugins, if they're releasing on Lotro interface, will give you information that will tell you whether or not this is the plugin for you. For instance, this is a deed tracking plugin. If you really like completing deeds and tracking which ones you have and haven't done yet, this is probably a good fit for you. If we go back out to the other tab, let's see. Well, I'll just search. The Waypoint plugin, again, one of my favorite plugins. If you easily get lost in this humongous world and you're trying to navigate to a specific location, maybe a friend has told you, hey, there's this really cool thing and has given you coordinates, well, the Waypoint plugin might be for you. It gives you an arrow on the screen, And the white text doesn't show up in game, but it shows you where you are navigating to, how far away it is, and in what direction you need to rotate your facing in order to be going in the right direction. It's so good. I can't recommend it highly enough. And one of the ways I found that was just by looking at these descriptions on Lotro interface and reading through and saying, that sounds amazing. Now, there are caveats. A lot of, because plugins can't do whatever they want, they have to work within the constraints of Lotro and what Lotro allows them to do. There are sometimes some caveats, some issues that will come up, and plugin developers are usually pretty good about putting that front and center. So, for instance, the waypoint here, he is saying that the way it works, Lunar says, is by using the /loc command. Now, when you use the /loc, it spits out a location. I can type it up. I also have it bound to a button on my mouse. And it spits out a location. Where are you? When are you? This is actually really useful if you're interacting with customer support. You're trying to report an issue like, this tree is growing sideways. They will usually ask you to do the /loc command, which makes it very easy for them to figure out where exactly in this humongous world you are. But plugins can see that too. Plugins can look at that text and say, I know where I am. And that's how Waypoint does this. In fact, we'll do a quick little thing. If I want to get to the Prancing Pony, we can see it's at 29.6 south, 51.2 west. And we can tell Waypoint using one of its commands, that's where I want to go to. And when you do the /loc command, it is able to figure out which way are you facing and how far away is the thing. Neat. Sorry, I go on and on about Waypoint because I love it so much. It's great. So, using the pages on Lotro interface, or oftentimes there's corresponding posts on the Lotro forums, you can learn about plugins. And within the game itself, you can come into the plugin manager, and oftentimes they will have some sort of an about page in here. Now, Waypoints is pretty minimalistic. Waypoint plugin directs you to set of coordinates with an arrow. I mean, that is really what it does. It doesn't necessarily need to be much more complicated than that. I went a little bit more verbose on the deed tracker. This is fully customizable by the plugin developer. There's an XML file, a plugin file, that you can write all this down into, and Lotro will put it into this little control here. So oftentimes you can look at plugins installed on your system and remember what they're supposed to do based on their description in the About page. You don't have to go off to the Lotro interface page or the Lotro forums because many of these will already be telling you that information. Awesome. Eldolith uses Waypoint for treasure caches. Yes, I use it for treasure caches. I use it for hard-to-find goblin camps. Now, in universe, I tend to think of it as, that ranger that we just spoke to gave us some directions on how to navigate this forest and find the orc encampment or whatnot. But from a meta perspective, it just sometimes is really useful to be like, on that side of the mountain. Right, gotcha. And so Lotro gives you a lot of affordances to find things using the radar, using the minimap, but sometimes an arrow saying, no, that way, right, this way, that right, keep going, is just super useful. Okay, so you can find out more about plugins on Lotro interface in the forums. You can find out inside of the plugins manager. What else can you do with this plugins manager window? Well, you may have noticed there's a tab here called options. Plugin developers can use this options tab to give you ways to modify the behavior of a plugin. Now, some plugins don't have any options. They're so straightforward in what they do. There's no customization. We can see Waypoint doesn't use an options window. Some plugins are so complicated that they have other, you do have to load a plugin before you can see its options, if there are any. Titan Bar has so many options, I suspect it may not use this window. Aha, but it does tell us options are available by right-clicking on Titan Bar. And this is why they're not in that little window. There's a bunch of them. Now, DTracker, one that I contribute to, is kind of in the middle of the road. There are a fair number of options, but they so far have fit inside the options window here. So if a plugin does have options that you can interact with here, it might look something like this, where you have text boxes where you can enter information, where you might have checkboxes, like all of this. Now, interacting with one of these depends on the plugin what happens. In the case of the DTracker, if I click this, it will immediately apply it. That may take a second sometimes, depending on the plugin. And we can see that it has checked itself. If I click it again, it may take a second, and then it has cleared. So the options that you interact with here are plugin specific. They are completely controlled by the plugin. Lotro just takes what the plugin says, here, this is the options page, please present it to the user, and puts it here, including the color of the background. You can see this is a dark gray background, whereas this background is black. That's the whole look and feel of this page is fully controlled by the plugin. So that's pretty cool. I'm going to pause for a drink of water. Excellent. Okay, so a question that I have heard from time to time, are plugins safe? And the answer is yes, and a tiny bit no, but mostly yes. So plugins cannot access your personal information. Plugins are running within Lord of the Rings Online. Plugins can interact with the game in a few very specific ways, but a plugin cannot access an arbitrary web page. It can't send information outside of the game. It can't say to the game, hey, what's this person's account name? What is this person's credit card number? None of that is available to a plugin. Plugins cannot interact with any space on your computer outside of the plugin data directory. Now, plugins exist in the plugins directory, but they can only read and write files inside the plugin data directory, and only within a few specific places within those. And plugins can't, well, I shouldn't say plugins can't crash your computer. Plugins can do an extraordinarily wide variety of things. Plugins can, and I've done this once or twice as I'm developing, crash the Lotro by doing something weird and unexpected. But usually Lotro is pretty good about saying, well, this plugin just ran off into the weeds, so we're just going to say no. It's very rare for Lotro to crash. And if that happens, if someone puts out a plugin that intentionally tries to crash your client, one, Lotro Interface is probably not going to host it. And two, even if they do, it's not going to last very long, as people say, hey, all this does is crashes the client. So in general, plugins that are on Lotro Interface are vetted at least a little bit. You have the rating system, you have comments on the threads there, and so even if a plugin could reliably crash your client, people are going to say, hey, don't download this, and you're going to be able to see that. The bigger issue of crashing other programs or corrupting your computer in general, that's just not something a plugin can do. A plugin is only running within Lotro, interacting with very specific ways. But the worst thing you can do with a plugin is just churn endlessly, doing calculations, doing things, and really slowing down the game and lagging the game. And again, if your plugin is doing that and making the game unplayable, people are going to be commenting on that in forums, both on Lotro Interface and probably Lotro, and there'll just be a big red flag on that. So plugins that have hundreds of thousands of downloads, plugins that are highly recommended by other people, these are not concerns that you need to be worrying about. Okay, we have a question from Iggy, who says, or who asks, are all things uploaded to Lotro Interface really guaranteed safe? Even if all the plugins themselves are safe, surely anyone can upload anything to the site, whether or not it's actually a plugin. This is an excellent question. On a future stream, I hope to both show how to develop a basic plugin and how to go through the upload process to Lotro interface. I have the idea for a very simple plugin that interacts with the Waypoint plugin. It'll be called Take Me There, and it will be a way to streamline the process of taking coordinates and giving them to Waypoint. And we'll go ahead and publish that, and we'll see what happens. And the very first thing that happens when you hit go is you're redirected to a page that says, hey, by the way, Lotro interface, we're going to look inside that zip file. We're going to reject it if it has malicious programs in it. Or probably any programs in it. We're going to review it to make sure that it looks like it works, and that it looks like it says what it does. Big, bold red letters that say this is not an automatic process. There's some oversight to the process. Now, that being said, could someone slip a file through the system? It is always possible, but Lotro is specifically loading something called a Lua file. Lua is a scripting language. If we go into one of these plugins, what we see is a plugin file, dtracker. Let's take a look and see what that looks like inside. So that long description that I wrote, that is right here, and we can see it in the About page here. Let me pull this back up. Make sure my face isn't covering it. So, welcome to dtracker. This plugin is designed, this plugin is designed. You can see that this text is just in there. And what we do is we tell Lord of the Rings Online, go find this file. It must end in .lua and try to load it as if it is a Lua script. Well, what does that look like? Well, this file is going to be a little ugly to look at, but this is a Lua scripting file, and it starts by telling the game what other files it needs, and it just describes some functionality for loading the plugin. And at the very end, it has some sort of a command. In this case, run this function. But the very first thing that happens is Lotro will use a Lua parser to try and load this file. And if this file is not a valid Lua file, then Lotro will say, well, that was not good. Try again later. So only Lua files can be loaded in this way, and only if they're valid Lua files. And then it'll further be checking to make sure it's interacting with Lotro in the correct ways, that you're not trying to call functions that just don't exist. So even if there was a file in this folder, super suspicious, don't run me.exe, even if this was part of that zip file that you extracted, nothing is actually running that file. You could manually come in here and run it yourself, but Lotro will not be running anything besides the one file that your manifest told it to load, assuming that that's a valid Lua script file. Cool. I'm glad that helped answer your question, Iggy. So yes, I don't know enough about the behind the scenes for Lotro interface to claim definitively what they do, but it would not surprise me if there's some automated checks going through. It wouldn't surprise me that someone has to manually look at your first upload to say, oh, does this person look like they're legitimate? These are sensible precautions for a site distributing this kind of stuff. So they put disclaimers on there that they may be doing any or all of that, but I don't know to what extent. But like I said, once it's sitting in your plugins directory, there's very limited things that Lotro itself will do with it. That being said, someone could potentially distribute a file with a plugin, especially if you're just passing around zip files with friends or getting it from some third-party site that maybe is a little less scrupulous about how well they check for these things. So keep yourself safe. Don't necessarily just go click random programs that you find in your plugins directory. You should never need to manually go into one of these unless you're doing something very specific. And one of the things that comes to mind when I say that, there's an excellent plugin called Songbook. I'm going to go ahead and install it right now. Songbook by Chiron does It is, in fact, one of those plugins that comes with an external application. You never have to use this, although Songbook will be less useful to you if you do. But the reason this exists is because of that limitation. A plugin cannot look at files that are outside of your plugin data directory. And to the sadness of music lovers everywhere, your music folder is outside of the plugin data directory. And so what Songbook does is it has a very simple hypertext application that looks at the information in your music directory and spits it out into a format in your plugin data directory. And then the Songbook plugin can go ahead and see what music you have. So for example, in fact, we can just do that right now because I don't have that loaded up. When I load the Songbook music library generator, it'll say, hey, I found these on your computer. We can go ahead and say build the song library. And it's just doing that. It's going through and it generated songs. It found 122 song files. I have a couple. And it went ahead and generated a Songbook data plugin file. And this is a file format that can be saved and loaded by plugins. So there may be reasons to have a third, an outside program like that to kind of slip around some of those limitations. But to be safe, as long as you don't run things that are in your plugins directory, as long as you let Lotro be in charge of that, you don't have to worry about any malicious things in your plugins. And if it's hosted on Lotro interface, and especially like Songbook has been downloaded tens of thousands of times, I'm sure, and has been used by a lot of people, it's pretty likely to be a good choice to be able to use that and feel safe about it. Okay. So I said plugins are safe, mostly yes, and a tiny bit no. What is that no? Well, it's that plugin data directory. This is the only place that plugins can go to, and Lotro does not really control a lot about what you write to. It does make sure that you're writing to a specific folder. So you're always writing to your account's folder, the account that is running this plugin. You can tell it, I want to write to a global all servers setting, which is what Songbook does. So all of your characters on all of your servers can see your Songbook information. That's great. There are server specific things. And on that server, something might apply to all characters, like some of your Titan bar information, or maybe the D tracker information. And there's some things that are character specific. The Titan bar settings for that character are stored here. And so plugins can get very granular about whether a setting is just for a character, for the entire server, or for the entire account. But Lotro doesn't control the names of files that you create or the content that goes in them, as long as it's coming from a valid Lua data structure. So if I were to write a malicious plugin that just happened to write into the file called Titan bar settings en.plugin data, there's nothing that stops my plugin from doing that, even though I'm not Titan bar. And so a bad actor could go through and wipe out some of your plugin data files. Now, this doesn't destroy the functionality of Lotro in any way. It doesn't hurt the game, but it means your one bad plugin could mess with other plugins. Now, again, just like any other bad acting plugin, if people see this happening, they're going to be talking about it. And if a plugin is getting downloaded a lot, chances are those plugin authors really care about what they're doing, really care about the community, and aren't going to be doing something like that intentionally. Accidents happen, but in general, that's why each one of these files has a prefix of the plugin name itself. dtracker, Titan bar, Songbook. Plugin developers are doing this both so you know what this file is, and also to drastically reduce the chance of accidentally overwriting someone else's file. So a malicious plugin could overwrite another plugin's file, but in general, the plugins you find on Lotro interface, especially the very popular ones, they do not do that. They wouldn't want to do that. So, and as we already discussed, a plugin could theoretically include a malicious file. Now that file is just sitting on your hard drive, it wouldn't do anything bad until you clicked on it. You probably shouldn't be clicking random programs you find on your computer anyway. But again, the well-known, well-reputed plugins this is going to be less of a concern, and as long as you're not clicking random things in your plugins directory, it's definitely not a concern. Okay, so yes, plugins don't have access to your information besides what Lotro gives to them, and that's pretty restricted. Okay. Let me just check chat. Looks like we are up to date there. Oh, Iggy has said, by the way, it's good to hear a lot of focus on the safety of this stuff. Too often on the internet, people seem to decide to trust them and download random things. Yeah, it's good to be mindful of these things. Plugins are generally safe, and you can generally let that just drift to the back of your head. But when you're downloading things from from websites, it's good to just think, is this legitimate? And coming from a trusted site like Lotro Interface is a great starting point. Excellent, I'm glad to hear that. Okay, so we have come to the end of my basic tutorial of what is a plugin, where do you find them, how do you load them, what does the plugin manager look like. That was sort of the basic stuff I wanted to cover, just so we had a common ground to start looking a little deeper. So we have an option of we can keep going. I'm good for another hour if people want me to keep talking about it tonight, or we could save that for next week. And while I get a drink of water, if you have opinions, just put them there into chat. Okay, well, no one is screaming for a break in chat, so I think we'll keep going for a little while later. Oh, Aldalet does have a question beyond the one I made, Deed Tracker. What is your favorite plugin to use? Well, if I am playing a Minstrel, and I very often am, then the Minstrel Buffs plugin is amazing. Now, the Minstrel Buff plugin here, we're going to go ahead and add that in. Now, where did it come? Excellent. Now, the Minstrel Buff plugin by itself is great, but I did, I must confess, I did add in some extra stuff on that as well. But the Minstrel Buff plugin, and I bet I can get into combat somewhere, but it should probably be somewhere a little bit more hostile. What do we think? Well, Minas Tirith isn't going to be much more hostile. Let's do return to, oh sure, Standard. Oops, sorry, I moved. So the Minstrel Buff plugin really helped refine my understanding of how minstrels work. Specifically, there's this thing about minstrels where the ballads, which are sort of your basic basic offensive ability that starts your chaining up to higher stuff. Your ballads have this text on them that says, expires if out of combat for 9 seconds. And that's a very incomplete description of what that actually, how minstrel ballads actually work. I got so into the weeds on this that I actually made a video and with Nikki's help, Little Redhead's help, and put it up on one of her YouTube channels. Let's see, can I attack this thing without killing it? Awesome. So the Minstrel Buffs plugin, when you have a ballad active, it'll show you that. And this is important because minstrels want to have 3 ballads active in order to be able to activate their anthems. What? Sorry, my mouse is misbehaving, and I wasn't expecting it to not attack me. So we can see we have 3 ballads there. We can start doing anthems. This was great, and so it's not a true answer to your question because I did do some work on it. I added a little bar that helps you see when these ballads are going to expire because the out of combat for 9 seconds is very incomplete. For instance, I've been out of combat for 9 seconds, but with Cry of the Chorus, I now have 3 of these ballad buffs. But I've been out of combat for 9 seconds, so why do I still have them? That kind of thing. But this plugin really got me started down the path of, oh, that's how Minstrel's working, and for that I'm really grateful for it because my enjoyment of Minstrels just really went up since I got that understanding of what was going on there. Besides that, plugins that I really haven't touched at all. Let's see. I have the current plugins that I use saved off so that I could show you what an empty plugin directory looks like. Buff monitors is a common one that I use, specifically with a pat that gives it little shortcuts to the thing that gives you the buff. Let's see, where else am I? I do use Titan Bar a lot. Little Redhead is correct. Oh, I'm looking in the wrong directory. That will do it. Also, let's see. Travel Window. Oh, Travel Window is so good. If you haven't used Travel Window, let's just go add it right now. Travel Window 2, which Travel Window, and you can see it's been called outdated now. The original distributor of the Travel Window just wasn't able to keep on working on it, and so someone new took it over. So Travel Window, let's get that thing going. Okay, so Travel Window, not surprisingly, is a window that says travel. But what this is a list of all your travel skills. And as you can see, I have a couple. And it comes with a few options. Now, I've gotten a little bit more used to the icon grid mode. And you can see this is effectively acts like more action bars, but just for your travel skills. So, the first 2 here are my milestones. So I could go back to Duland and Minas Tirith Midsummer for festival activities. Travel to Personal House, travel to Kinship House, but then we can also see all the other places, Thorin's Gate and Bree and Other Bree and Rivendell, although since I'm a bad elf, I don't have that one equipped in my traits, and Osgiliath and all the way down. Oh, that's so funny. Now, Travel Window is one of those that has a lot of different options, including rearranging the order of all these. So if you're ever liking this but would like to tweak some sort of thing, check out the options. There's a bunch of things in here that you can do with that. So Travel Window, I'm a big fan of. There's, let's see. Oh, daily tasks. This is really fantastic. Let me go defeat something else so I get some more task items. So daily tasks. Let's go ahead and add that in. Great. Oh, it's not showing up. I'll hit the little green arrow. It's loaded now. Great. Daily tasks has a lot of command line options and some window options. So if you type in /DTW for daily task window, you'll get a window that looks like this. But you can also just type in /DT and it'll look through your inventory and find things that are either junk, which as we can see, this is that trophies category of items that just isn't useful for a task board. Thank you, Standing Stone Games, for finally separating those out. Before that, the Daily Task plugin was even more useful because it knew that it was junk, even though the game would still give you that trophies can be this item may be turned in for tasks, even though that wasn't true for them. But even so, knowing what you can turn in an item for, so we can see here that this stretch skin is good for Men of Dunland, Men of Dunland, Men of Dunland, Men of Dunland. These are the 4 locations you can turn it in for Men of Dunland, or if you have personal housing or easy access to personal housing, you can just go ahead and run on over to the large bank of task boards, find the level 61, and turn it in there. So super helpful for saying, what is this good for? I'm sorry, I can't resist the Scar and Deposit. Make this game for Linux users. Well, I am not part of Standing Stones. I am just a fan of the game and a fan of sharing my love of plugins with people. That being said, as a software engineer in my day job, I can tell you that making cross-platform anything is a trick and a half, and making something that's so graphics heavy like a video game it takes a lot of effort to make it cross-platform without causing undue pain and agony for the developers, and to bring a good and excellent experience to people of all of those platforms. So whatever platforms they are supporting right now, kudos to them, because if I had to write for more than one platform at a time, it's super difficult to do that well. Oh, looks like... So, Iggy, back up a little bit, said, I was looking at DTracker and noticed she had to download various other things first. Would it be possible for you to provide everything you need in one download / Lotro interface page to make it more foolproof? Well, that's an excellent question. I showed this at the very beginning of talking about installing plugins. I don't know if you were on the stream at the time, but one of the things the Lotro plugin compendium does is it takes care of that for you. So when you install the DTracker through the Lotro plugin compendium, it installs any prerequisites automatically. And so, oh, you weren't here at the start. Cool. If you get a chance, feel free to go back and look at that. But that is one of the beautiful things about the Lotro plugin compendium. When you tell it to install something, it installs that plus anything else you need to install to use it. And for most plugins, that's either just the plugin itself or the plugin and some Turbine, it's called Turbine, some game-specific libraries that a lot of plugin developers use. So chances are pretty good it's already on your system if you use plugins. It's one of the funny things when you're using these plugins, because the plugin interface system was developed while the game was still made by Turbine. You'll see a lot of references to Turbine in the plugin architecture. It would be a breaking change to change all those things to Standing Stone Games or SSG, and so I'm very glad that they have not gone through that, because plugins that are older, that predate that transition, that they still work just fine. All else. What languages do I currently use? Well, I'm trying to learn Dutch, and I'm natively fluent in English, but programming languages, I use a lot of C# in work, JavaScript and HTML for front-end GUIs. Obviously, for Lotro, we're using Lua scripting here, and I dabble in some other things as well. Okay. Looks like that may have caught up on chat. Neat. Well, since I was almost at the bottom of the list, let's see. Oh, reminders. Oh, reminders is delightful. Let me show you that. Reminders. Cool. So, as we just saw, that install process did not take very long, and if it required any prerequisites, Lotro plugin compendium took care of that. So, come back into the menu. Sorry. Come back into the menu, don't click the wrong thing, and click Plugin Manager. Great. Refresh and Reminders. Reminders is super nifty. If you have something you want to do or want to remember, there are other ways to, other plugins that just give you like a notepad-like thing. But Reminders gives you a way to kind of automate doing things regularly. So if I wanted a reminder to talk about plugin development, and I want to be reminded at the next login or possibly in 30 seconds. And then when it goes off, hopefully you were able to see it gave you a little reminder on the screen. In fact, can I do that? Like, yeah, there we go. Okay. So 7 seconds, you can see it ticking down. The usual reset time for a lot of the things I do in game is server reset time, 3 a.m. server time. Oh, and we got a little pop-up here. What type of pop-up it gives is configurable. So if you would rather have, let's see. Sorry, now I'm having to remember what the options are. There's a way to make it sort of do a beacon-like thing. Oh, that wasn't it. I'll have to look into that. Reminders is great. When it sees that you're doing a repeatable quest, for instance, a lot of the festival quests are repeatable, it'll say, hey, this is a repeatable quest. You've done it before. Do you want to just set a reminder so you keep remembering to do it? Now, for the Minas Tirith quests, they're all in one place, so it's a little overkill to do that. But for some of the outlying ones, like don't forget to go do the stable races if you want to go do that. Don't forget to do the quests at the party tree or down in Kellendam. So reminders is really cool. You can do freeform stuff, but it'll also automatically detect things like the ingredient crate boxes. In fact, I think my time is up. I should go grab those. Okay, I'm using my travel to personal house. And we'll see how long it takes to transition over there. Excellent. Uh-oh, now you know where I live. So, the ingredient crates, if you're not familiar with them, they're available as yard decorations from the Lotro store. And when you use them, you get a universal ingredient pack. Those go into your wallet, universal ingredient packs, and you can use them in crafting in place of ingredients for many, many recipes, but not that one. So for instance, if I wanted to make these Kalinard Battle Pauldrons, it's either going to take 2 low-grade Kalinard ingots or 2 universal ingredient packs, as long as I'm okay with it being bound to my account. Super neat. So, because they're so useful, it is an obvious thing to want to be reminded about. So Reminders knows that whenever you use that ingredient crate, it'll either create or reset the reminder, so that in 22 hours, when that timer is up, Reminders will say, by the way, don't forget, you could get your ingredient crates. Awesome. So, that was a long-winded way of answering the question of which plugins I like to use. If I had to say which one of those was my favorite, that would be a little harder. I have to think about that. But the one, Waypoint or Minster Buffs with the Out of Combat timer add-on that I added in. But that or the Waypoint. Lori would like the bound to account thing to get removed from a lot of things. It's annoying when they want to craft something on one account for a second account. Well, yeah, it's a trade-off of those universal ingredient packs. They're really good, and what I really love them for is my main character here is an armorer, so Metalsmith and Tailor, and what I really love is being able to go and do high-level stuff for my alts and just be able to pop out maybe even guild level recipes. So they're those automatic crits of the single use, they're those variants. And you can just come in here, use those ingredient packs and pop them out for alts that, oh, you just hit 85? Congratulations, here's a whole bunch of really cool stuff. And yeah, it'd be neat if we could pass them around to other people, but as soon as you remove that restriction, it seems like it would kind of break the crafting system a little bit more than maybe SSG wants to do. So Iggy is asking a question about the deed tracker. So the deed tracker exists as a Lotro plugin, and as such, it can only do things that Lotro allows it to do. And one of the things Lotro doesn't allow plugins to do is to say, hey, what deeds are done? So by itself, the deed tracker can't do that. But there is a workaround, just like I showed you earlier with the Songbook plugin. There is a workaround. We'll do that real fast. So let's see. I mentioned earlier in the stream there is a great desktop application, not a Lotro plugin, called Lotro Companion. And one of the things it can do is it can go in and it can, while Lotro is running, go in and read information about that character. For instance, what deeds it has done, stuff in inventory, all sorts of fun stuff. And so as it's importing that information there, I'm going to go ahead and go on over to the deed tracker. Excellent. So we can see the deeds were imported. So we're all done there. Now we'll just minimize you. One of the things that is distributed with the deed tracker and is not required to use it, but is an optional extra, is something called import deed completion from Lotro Companion.hta. Now this is a hypertext application, and it's important to be aware when you're using things like this, as they act a lot like any other program on your computer. It has access to the files you have access to, and it's important to be mindful of running programs like this. Now, the benefit of a hypertext application, if you have any programming knowledge or background, or you know someone who does, is you can go in here and see, what is this thing doing? And it's pretty boring. It's looking at those files that Lotro Companion produced and spitting them out in a way that the deed tracker plugin can use. But be mindful. Plugins as used within Lotro are safe. They're not a danger to you or your computer. Random files that you find in a folder on your computer, you should be mindful of what you're doing. Now, in this is the case, I did write this, and it is safe. It's not going to touch any file on your computer that's not in that plugin data directory. But just be aware that if you run this, it can do that. So when we run it, it goes and looks. It finds information. Oh, that's funny. And we're going to go ahead and do an import. Sweet, we've done some import. Import process is complete. That's really all it takes, because back in here on the deed tracker, if I go ahead and reload the deed tracker, then it's going to see that that import happened. Takes a minute for it to load. When it sees that you hit that import button, it's going to pop up a special screen. You'll only see it this one time. Sometimes it's underneath the other one. Let me slide that out of the way there. And it's going to say, oh, by the way, Companion thought there were these 1,447 deeds completed that you don't have marked off over here. Okay, let's import them. Sweet. Okay, so now those are imported. We can see, in fact, we're done with Eriador. Sweet. Let's keep going. So no, you don't have to check them off, but if for any reason you were concerned about a third-party file that didn't execute from within Lotro, which is a safe way to do plugins, then you do not have to use it. It's just one of those optional extras where you can bypass the manual clicking off of a bunch of deeds. Now, something like Deed Tracker is pretty good, where you say, oh, I've completed Explorers of Far Anorian. Well, it knows by definition you also completed the other things. Are you done with the deeds of Far Anorian? Great, you must be done with everything else. So you don't have to even check things off when you start using it. When you complete a wrapper deed, it'll automatically start checking off the prerequisites to that. Well, hello, Lotro Stream. Hello. I'm glad to see you stopping in for a minute. Siren says this is exactly what I need. I agree. For one character, checking off those deeds is kind of a nice cathartic, yes, I did it, yes, I did it. And you can see that progress being built. But by the time I hit my third or fourth character, I was like, is there a better way to do that? And the answer is yes. Yes, there is. And Songbook, which I love, inspired me because that hypertext application is so clear and easy for someone to look at and make sure it's not doing anything malicious, and also powerful enough to generate the files that we need. So it set a great example. So thank you, Chiron, for that excellent plugin. Love it. Oh, can post a link to this one. Well, that depends on what you mean by this one. But if you meant a link to the deed tracker, it is there. If you meant a link to one of the other plugins, just put it into chat and we'll get that for you. Oh yeah, you're welcome. Okay. So we talked about a lot about plugins. We talked about where to find them, how to know they're the right plugin for you, how to load them in game, how to know that they're safe, and basics about all of that. So one of the things I thought we could continue on either today or first thing next week is how does one make a plugin? Because that's what really fascinates me is not just using plugins that other people have made, but getting inspired by them and things that I see while I'm playing the game and say, oh, wouldn't it be cool if, and just following that down the rabbit hole. So that's really where my work on the deed tracker came, is after Bombadil last summer, which some people will describe as a PvP server, and some people will describe as a deed completion server with some PvP going on over there, but stay away from me, I'm completing deeds. I thought, wouldn't it be neat to have an in-game way of tracking this a little bit better than what we had available? So for a long time, people in the community have used spreadsheets like Barry's Completionist Tracker as an outside the game way of tracking what's available, what's done. And that's fantastic. Barry did not continue past Rohan, maybe, though. So as I and people I was playing with were approaching Gondor, it kind of got to that pressing, how am I gonna track my progress here? Because I really like knowing which deeds I have done and which deeds I haven't done. And Bombadil really sort of got that going in my head. It's like, what can we do about that? And then I saw the Hidbold Assistant by Galahad, and Hidbold used to be harder because things took more tokens to complete them back when it was first released, or at least I assume based on what's going on here. And it's conceivable that you could see some similarities between the Hidbold Assistant plugin and the deed tracker, because I saw this and things sort of clicked in my head. I was like, whoa, that's cool. And so as you were progressing on these things, the progress bar filled in. This is a direct predecessor to the deed tracker. The box to select which character you're looking at, the total progress bars, tokens of how much more things you need. All of these crystallize in my head as this is what I need to be able to present and use the incredible number of deeds in some meaningful way. And so it was the combination of playing the game and seeing what other people had done, and just sort of that thing at the edge of my head of, wouldn't it be neat? That direct line, Bombadil, Hidbold Assistant, deed tracker. So, oh, hey, Moobot is saying things. Thanks, Moobot. Ah, sweet. LotroStream is saying that the Midsummer's been extended through July 11th, which I think is a week later, give or take, than it was going to be. That's cool. That's good. I've been working on Ale Association in the background when I'm not doing stuff in Minas Tirith, and it's slow progress. So a few extra days there does not hurt at all. Anyway, let's look at what it would take to start making a deed. And for that, I'm going to go back and kind of reset a few of these windows. Okay, let's unload plugins. we're going to go ahead and unload this all. Great. And get rid of that. Wow, I just have gotten a bunch of windows open. That's sort of a side effect here. Yeah, we're ready for that. Awesome. Okay, so we have no plugins. We should get a plugin. What does it look like to start making your own plugin? Well, a lot of times we just copy an existing plugin file. Now, this isn't mandatory, but it's very helpful to take an existing plugin file and tweak it for what we need. So I'm actually going to bring back the DTracker plugin. Well, that's not right. It decided it wanted to copy a lot more than I wanted it to copy. There we go. Okay. Okay, so the classic structure of a plugin folder is the person distributing it goes in the outer folder, and then plugins go inside of that. And that's useful because Cube plugins, the moniker I use for plugins is Cube. DTracker is under there, but any other plugins I produce could also be under there. And it's a useful way of organizing things. So if we were going to make a plugin along plugin, we would name this outer folder plugin along. Awesome. Now, a classic thing to do when you are learning how to program is to create a hello world program. And that's what we can do right now. So let me open that up, bring it on over here. What does a file like this look like? Well, like I said, it's going to be really a lot easier if we copy an existing file, because that one worked, so this one probably will too. So I'm going to go copy the DTracker information and start changing it. So what is this going to be? Well, we're just going to call it Hello World. Who's the author? The author is plugin along, and version. Version is an arbitrary string. Lotro doesn't care about it. This is just for you and your plugin audience to know if something is newer. I like to start at 1 and kind of work my way up. And depending on your background, if you're a software engineer background, you might find meaning in major versions, minor versions. You might find different ways to use these things. For me in DTracker, the first one is just really major changes. So everything so far has been version 1. The second one I use for breaking changes. So when I changed how the save files worked, I incremented it from 1 to 2 so that I could at a glance look and say, okay, new system, old system, if it was version 1 or version 2. And then within that, I just increment based off of changes. So we're currently on version 5, so the next time I put it out, it'll just be 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, until something major comes along, and then this will reset down to 0. But for new plugins, I typically will just start at 1.0.0, and it'll stay at 1.0.0 until the first time I send it to someone else. And this is important because when you send plugins to people, they will sometimes tell you that something is wrong with it, which is great and very sad. And when they tell you something's wrong with it, the first question is, well, what version are you running? And so you want to make sure whenever you make changes that someone else has their hands on, that there's a unique version number there. Because otherwise, they will say, well, I'm on version 1. And you'll be like, nuts. So version number, start at 1, increment it when people get their hands on it. Okay, image. Well, what's the image thing? The image is the image that is being shown right here. Now, for a plugin, it can be whatever you want it to be, but usually you can find something that makes sense. For instance, this is the symbol for reputation deeds within Lotro. It's one of my favorite symbols when you're looking at the deed log. Like, yeah, the lore ones are fine, but the explorer ones, I mean, the telescope is cool, but I really do like the reputation ones. Yeah, Slayer is okay. So that seemed like an obvious choice for the deed tracker. The other symbol that I've used a lot is the book itself from here, the deed log. I don't use this mini very often, so when I was looking at it, it's like, oh, that's cool. So I kind of regret not using it here. Maybe I'll fix that one of these days. So the image, though, you're just giving it a path. So plugging along, hello world, and it can be whatever we want. In fact, I really like the waypoint. No, sorry, not the waypoint. It might be the daily tasks. It just uses a Lotro ring. So we'll do that. Okay, so plugins, plugging along. We have a folder called Hello World, and we'll put ring.tga in there. Ring. Awesome. Package. This is the file that Lotro will try to load as a Lua script when you load the plugin. Plugging along. Then it's going to be in the Hello World, and then main. That actually sounds lovely. And then an apartment. An apartment is a broader umbrella under which multiple plugins can exist. Generally, you'll just want to call this the same thing as your plugin. If you're doing something special, you might change that here. But that's the basic plugin file. Hello world.plugin. The plugin tells Lotro, hey, I can tell you information about stuff here. Okay. Hello world.plugin. Have I missed anything? I've missed a description. That would be useful. This is a plugin along original. Okay. And if I've done everything right, we're going to see a new plugin available here in the plugin manager. Awesome! That's the very basic thing we need to do in order to get Lotro to understand that there's a plugin there. It's a plugin file. Under the covers, you'll see it as an XML file. And really, the things we need to do are between these bracketed tags. So if you have an already existing plugin, you can just change that file to suit your purposes. Oh, I'm running out of water here. I've got enough to keep going. Okay. So what happens if we try to load this? Well, not a lot, because we haven't written any code yet. My window is normally in other places. I wonder what. I don't know what channel that comes out of. All right, we'll sneak this up here. Hopefully there's nothing naughty in chat. So, unable to resolve package. So I said load, unable to resolve package. And that's fair because the file that I told it to load isn't actually there. What does that mean? Well, oh, thank you so much. Water reinforcement. Okay, so I think maybe putting these side by side will be useful. So in the .plugin file, we said load this file, main. And Lotro knows that means main.lua, Lua. And so what we didn't do was give it a main.lua to load. And we should do that, main.lua. Perfect. All right, well, does it load now? Probably not, because there's nothing in there, but I'm curious. And that's one of the neat things with plugins is, as a general rule, it's okay to try things. Hey, it loaded. It didn't do anything, but it loaded. So Lotro found that file and loaded it. There was nothing in there, so that was really fast. And it did all the commands that were in that file, and there weren't any, so that was really fast. And then said, okay, we're done. Fantastic. Let's see. let's make it do something. In the main.lua function, in the main.lua file, the way the parser works is it reads everything from top to bottom and tries to execute statements. So if you're not familiar with Lua, the language itself is very simple. That's why multiple plugin systems across numerous games use it. It's very straightforward to learn to make it do things that you want it to do. So let's say we wanted to write something to chat. We can say Turbine, and this is one of those places you're going to see Turbine. Again, that's the original developer of Lotro, and for compatibility reasons, it's just never been changed. So, Turbine is a namespace, shell is a namespace, WriteLine is a function, and hello world is telling to do stuff. You tell Lua that you're done writing the statement that you're writing with a semicolon, and then you go back into Lotro and see what happens. Oh, cool, it said hello world. Well, there we go. We have a plugin. Great. All right, let's be a little bit more honest. This plugin will say hello world. So this plugin will say hello world. We load it, it said hello world. Awesome. Says what it does. Now, that's not the most functional plugin, but it is the kind of bare minimum of what it takes to have a plugin. Everything from here on out is built using that structure. Lotro, here is how to load this plugin by loading this specific file, and the file gives instructions to either do something now or do something later. Cool. Yeah, I know. That's from here everything else goes. It is very cool. Let's see. I'm just checking out my notes here. Okay. There are a bunch more things to explore doing plugin development. One of the places I spend a lot of time when I'm doing this are some what's called an API documentation. I'm going to pull up a link here so that you can follow along at home. Okay, so the Lotro interface website has a wiki, has a Lotro interface wiki inside of it. And in there is an API reference. API is an application programming interface. It's the system that Lotro exposes things that you can do. Lotro is the final determiner of what you can do as a plugin. And so when Lotro says, this is how you make a window, well, that's how you make a window. And if you want to make a window, you do that. The basic outline of the API is divided into these namespaces. So everything starts with Turbine in the namespaces. And underneath that are all the things that you can do. So for instance, when we wrote that command out to the shell, we went Turbine shell WriteLine. This is information about what we just did. The syntax section is showing what's going on. Text is, it's going to be displayed. It's going to be written out. Awesome. And it tells us that it's going to go into the standard chat channel, which is great. That's where we saw it, so we know that's working. There are other things in here, and there are other namespaces. There's the gameplay space, where you might ask things about the player, and this is how plugins that deal with players or equipment are going to get their information from the game so that they can do what they're doing with it. There's gameplay attributes, so these are going to tell you things about classes or races. There's the UI itself. This is where we learn how to make a window or a label or a button. And then there's Lotro-specific UIs. where you start getting Lotro branded things. So this window is not just a window, but it's a Lotro window. So it's got the fancy border with the little leaves here and the blue button at the top. And once you start seeing it, you start seeing everywhere, oh yeah, that's the exact same window over here. Oh, that's the exact same window over here. Oh, that's the exact same window. Those are all Lotro windows under the cover. And that's very helpful for those people who do skins, because if you replace that one, if you change how that one thing is drawn, so maybe this button up here is green, it changes all of them, including plugins. So I spend a lot of time looking at these pages. In fact, I said I was going to paste a link, and then I didn't do that. I spend a lot of time looking at these for both ideas on things you can do, and also just understanding how to do something. Oh, if I want to make a label, I should probably go here and take a look at what's going on and what are the options. Okay. So we have done an overview of what plugins are, where we can find them, how we use them, load them up, install them, all that good stuff, and some very basics of what it looks like to start creating our own plugin. This might be a good time to kind of wrap it up, answer any final questions, and then next week we can start digging into maybe what does it take to make a window pop up on the screen, to start making text that we control, to make buttons that when we press them something happens, to make windows that you can drag around or resize, all these fun things. So that seems like where I see this going next week. If you have thoughts or ideas, things you want to see, things you want to learn, you can always message me on Twitch. I'm pretty sure I have unknown messages allowed, or as it says in the deed tracker. Let's see. Oh. You can always send an email to lotrodeedtracker@gmail.com and reach me there. And I'd be happy to either answer the questions if there are any at the beginning of the next stream, or if you have ideas of where you would like to see this to go, that's great too. Let's see. Oh, Joran the Cole says, I've only been here for the past 20 minutes, but I've learned a heck of a lot, thank you. Well, you're very welcome. I'm glad to have you. Do feel free to check out the replay both here and eventually it'll be up on YouTube somewhere. And I hope you will get a chance to join us next week. Ah, yes, LS has already said that. Awesome. Forever is a long time, Iggy. I don't know about forever, but for the foreseeable future, yes, both here on Twitch and on YouTube. You know, one hopes I will be around forever, but the odds perhaps say no. We'll see. Awesome. Okay. Well, in that case, I think that's all we're going to cover today. Thanks for joining me on this exploration of Lotro plugins. I hope to see you next week, and until then, keep plugging along. All right, bye-bye now.